Hello, everybody. Welcome to what I am gonna be calling a continuation of my reactions to the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb.
In Saudi Arabia. Welcome to the News Hour.
Thanks.
As broader peace talks continue in Saudi Arabia, the U.S. today said an agreement has been reached to ensure safe navigation in the Black Sea. Does that provide any hope toward a more encompassing ceasefire deal?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we have to split the process into two. First is a ceasefire, and only after that can you negotiate an actual peace agreement and a peace settlement. And it looks like we're taking the ceasefire step by step. So first there was an idea of not bombing energy and infrastructure. Now we're going to the Black Sea. So I think what the Americans have brokered here is a good first step towards some kind of a full-on ceasefire.
And the U.S. is also acknowledging that it will pursue sanctions relief for Russian food, fertilizer, and shipping companies. Is that an appropriate accommodation for Russia, in your view?
Well, I can't take a stand on what the American administration does on sanctions. On the European side, I don't see any lifting of sanctions at this stage. As a matter of fact, we're working on a 17th package. But it is with certain joy that I hear that American senators are putting up a sanction package led by Senator Lindsey Graham, where the idea is that if the ceasefire is broken, then a new wave of sanctions will be put down. Because in my experience, the only thing that Putin and Russia understands is power.
Let's hear that point again.
The only thing that Putin and Russia understands is power.
And again, we return to the classical Finnish Russophobia. So this is, and Alexander Stubb holds this view, and we see it evidently here, of the quote, the only thing that Putin and Russia understands is power. Now, when he says Russia, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's talking about the Russian state, the Russian oligarchs, right? Not the regular Russian people. But again, this is a Russophobic claim because it is making the assumption that Putin only wants more power, and wants to invade all these places to do something, I don't know, to create the new Russian Empire. I don't know. But the problem with this sort of speculation is that it is not evidenced. And it is based upon the non-analyzation of the recent conflicts that Russia has been in. From Georgia to Ukraine, right? It lacks analysis, this sentence of Putin and Russia understands is only power. It lacks analysis of the wars, and it lacks understanding of Russia's view, right? It lacks understanding of what Putin and what Russia wants as security, right? It lacks analysis.
Let's talk more about that, because there is concern across Europe about the current administration's stance on Vladimir Putin. President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, in a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, called Vladimir Putin super smart, said he didn't regard him as a bad guy. And he also suggested that there are Ukrainians who want to live under Russian rule. Take a
And this is absolutely correct.
listen to what he said.
I think the largest issue in that conflict are these so-called four regions: Donbass, Crimea,
Donbass, Crimea, Zaporizhia.
The names
Lugansk,
Lugansk, and there's two others. They're Russian-speaking.
Yep.
Correct.
There have been referendums where the overwhelming majority of the people have indicated that they want to be under Russian rule.
Yes, this is absolutely correct.
Yes.
I think that's the key issue. Who doesn't want to have a world where Russia and the United States are doing collaboratively good things together?
This is a sentence of which, when I looked at this before I started recording, this is a sentence that I took to heart, because I love this sentence. Who doesn't want this? Seriously, think to yourself right now. Because here's the thing. Think of Putin for a minute here. I want everybody to think of Putin for 2 minutes here. What has Putin done since he got into power? Putin and Russia in general tried to join America and NATO 2 times. Once, I believe it was in 2001, and Putin tried again in 2011. They tried to be a part of the big boy table. Nowadays, now it's shifting because Putin understands that America does not want to do deals and teamwork with Russia, and neither does Europe. Ultimately, aggressive look at Russia. But seriously, think to yourself, who doesn't want to live in a world, seriously, where Russia and United States do collaboratively good things together? That's assuming that they will do things good together, right? But again, the fact that they are not aligned, and this is causing bigger issues for smaller nations, this cannot be the final thing, which is why we need to move away from a unipolar world order, which is ruled by America currently, to a multipolar world order, where America, Russia, China, African countries, Brazil, all have a word and all have influence around the socioeconomic world.
What's your reaction to that?
Finland has a 1,340 kilometer long border with Russia, and we've coexisted with Russia and the Soviet Union. Since the 1300s, we've had roughly 30 wars and skirmishes.
This is the single most weird claim I have ever heard in my life. Ever. If we talk about Finnish history, I don't know if... He says we have had roughly 30 wars and skirmishes. I don't know what that means. Because if we're talking about independent Finland from since 1917, we've had 4 wars, right? Our Civil War, Winter War, Continuation War, and Lapland War, right? 2 of those were with Soviet Union. One of them was amongst ourselves, the Civil War. And the last one was against the Germans, who were still occupying Finland after the peace deals were made with Soviet Union. So I have no idea where Alexander Stubb is getting 30. I don't know if he's including the other wars that happened during the Russian Empire under the Grand Duchy of Finland. But I highly doubt that you can say that Finland had 30 wars. So that would be 27 wars under the Russian Empire. I don't know, maybe there is this list. I'll put it into screen right now if I can find a list of the 27 wars that were under Russian Empire of the Grand Duchy of Finland was included in. But I don't believe this 30 right now. However, if I do find it, I will put it on screen right now.
So my take is that with Russia, you always have to be alert and you have to be quite careful. Perhaps Mr. Witkoff looks at things a little bit from a real estate perspective and sees this a little bit as a zero-sum game. And in my experience with the Russians, it's a little bit more complicated than that. The only thing that Russia understands is power.
Okay, I want to go back and see that. So he says that he claims that the Mr. Witkoff sees things as a little bit of a zero-sum game. I'm sorry, but I don't think us Europeans can say that somebody else is having a zero-sum game thing, because we've been playing that exact same goal with Ukraine. We've been saying it's a zero-sum game. Either Ukraine holds all of its 1991 borders, or nothing. We just delay the war completely. That's the zero-sum game Europe has been pushing. Now when it comes to, again, this claim of my experience with the Russians, the only thing that Russians understands is power. I'm sorry, this is pure Russophobia. This is pure Russophobia. This is villainizing Russia to an extreme degree, to a degree that, again, lacks analysis of Russian foreign policy. It really lacks it, and it's very unfortunate.
There's a saying that if you have a bayonet in your hand in Russia and it's soft, you push it through. If it hits something hard, you pull back. And I think right now is the time to be hard, not soft with Russia.
I don't know what he means here by saying it's time to be hard, not soft with Russia. Because I'm sorry, but last time when we were here, in this kind of an area, we looked at, as Alexander Stubb said, we have a 1,300 kilometer border with Russia, and we have to defend it, and it's a threat. That Russia is a threat. Is this evident still? Not really. And again, if you want to say that the Finnish state has to be hard with Russia, well, now we do. Because you have a NATO flag behind you, Stubb. We joined NATO, right? We have clearly given the message and a middle finger to Russia, saying, fuck you, and we're America's now, and we're gonna play by their rules, and we're not gonna try to be friends with you, and we're not gonna try to be non-aligned. We're not gonna try to have a stable Baltic Sea.
Given Finland's long border with Russia, how have you adjusted your defense strategy in light of the invasion?
Well, we really haven't, apart from, of course, joining the alliance.
Horseshit. So I want everybody to look.
The invasion.
Well,
He says that since, with the long border, what have you done? Well, we haven't. What? This is a lie. I'm sorry. Alexander Stubb is just straight up lying. What did we do since the invasion? We joined the NATO. We gave 15 military bases to America. I'm stressing this point again. And we are building a fence along the Russo-Finnish border. And we kept closing and opening it back and forth, back and forth. And we are buying more planes from America. So, I'm sorry, but to say that, we really haven't done anything to our military apart from joining NATO is a flat-out lie. This is a lie that the president is saying.
Really haven't, apart from, of course, joining the alliance. You have to remember that having had such a long border and experience with Russia, we've always had one of the strongest militaries in Europe. We have 62 F-18s. We bought 64 F-35s from the US.
Hold on. He says it right there. We bought 64 F-35s from the US, and he just said that we did nothing. That we have done nothing to combat the Russians, the villainous Russians who are coming. That we have done nothing apart from joining the alliance. But here we immediately say that we've bought 64 F-35s. Hello?
We have long-range missiles, land, air, and sea, and we have the biggest artillery in Europe together with Poland. And as I always say, we don't have them because we're worried about Stockholm. We have them because we want to have a deterrent towards Russia.
Okay.
Worried about Stockholm. We have them because we want to have a deterrent towards Russia.
I do realize that the media here cut the rest of his sentence off because he continues here, but I'm gonna ignore that for 2 seconds. And here's the thing. The Finnish state has always thought that Russia is gonna eventually attack, so we need to have a deterrent. But again, I would say this. If we had proper talks, proper policy, proper politics between Finland and Russia, we wouldn't need such a deterrent. If we merely said, and we merely went on with being militarily non-aligned, and did trade with Russia, not only would Finnish people benefit from, better trade, but also we would just have a more stable Baltic Sea and a more stable border with Russia, right? So, and now we've made that more unstable than it has since 1945. And again, I would say this also goes against the very first statement that he said that, we haven't done anything to do with the invasion of Ukraine and to deter Russia. But right here we have a deterrent. I'm sorry, the last two statements were either flat-out lies or based on speculation and Russophobia.
You have said that the only real solution to deter Moscow was to militarize Ukraine to its teeth. How can Europe do that without the full support of the US? Is it possible?
Well, we have to work hand in hand. The first observation to make is that, of course, the biggest military power in Europe right now is Ukraine. Just give you one example. 3 years ago when the war started, they were not able to produce any drones. Last year, they produced 1.5 million. This year, they will produce 4.5 million.
I want everybody to listen to this one more time because there's a very important point here.
Last year, they produced 1.5 million. This year, they will produce 4.5 million.
This year, they will produce 4.5 million. So we won't have peace? I think this is the most obvious part in the entire interview that shows that Alexander Stubb, either Alexander Stubb or whoever is, doing this paper, whichever script he's reading from, or if this is his opinion, then it shows that peace is nowhere near if this is what we're doing right now. Right? if Ukraine is prepared and willing to do 4.5 million drones and to continue to get troops from France and Britain, then it shows that peace negotiations are nowhere near, unfortunately. Although we would want it really badly, and I would want it really badly, because there's nothing more that we would want than peace in Ukraine, and peace in Donbass, and peace in Crimea. But based on the last 4 statements of the president of Finland, I would say, based on those assertions alone, I don't think even the president believes that peace is near, unfortunately.
So, of course, we need to continue to support Ukraine, but it is, in all honesty, very important, of course, that the United States continues to support Ukraine, because what we want to do is we want to avoid this thing happening again. And the only way in which you do it is by making sure that Ukraine is strong enough that there's no incentive for Russia to attack again.
Problem I have with this. So, Alexander Stubb says that we need to arm Ukraine to its teeth to make sure this doesn't happen again. The war is not over, okay? The war is still going on. The special military operation by Russia is still continuing, right? Right? So, either we are arming Ukraine to its teeth to delay the war continuously and to, pray for some sort of Ukrainian-sided victory. I think this is either a lie or then just not knowing it. I'm sorry, but saying that Ukraine needs to be armed to the teeth and then say that, oh, Russia cannot do this again. Well, how can Russia do it again if the war hasn't ended? You're just delaying the war. Russia's not going to do it again if the war's still going on.
You mentioned that Finland is buying some 60-plus F-35s from the U.S. A number of European leaders, your counterparts, are now apparently looking to buy weapons from elsewhere because they view the U.S. as being a less than reliable partner. For example, just today, a conservative member of parliament in Denmark tweeted in response to the speculation about F-35 having a kill switch that would allow the U.S. to potentially disable it. But in this tweet, he says, I don't know if there's a kill switch in the F-35s or not. We obviously cannot take your word for it. I can easily imagine a situation where the USA will demand Greenland from Denmark and will threaten to deactivate our weapons and let Russia attack us when we refuse.
So I want to make a small point again. So this is made by a Danish person, right? A Danish person says this, that, will threaten to deactivate our weapons and let Russia attack us when we refuse. To say that Russia will attack Denmark is probably the foolish thing I've heard. Again, when it comes to any European nation that is not currently in a conflict with Russia, needs to have an evidence that Russia has geopolitical interest in your country. I've tried asking for many, many years of that with Finland, right? I've asked for it, and I've tried looking, and there's no consistency here, right? And I would love for Danish people to say, okay, here's what Russia wants from us, and this is the evidence. I highly doubt I'm ever going to see it, or anyone will see it.
Therefore, buying American weapons is a security risk that we cannot run. Do you share that view?
Well, no, I don't share that view. I mean, 2 observations on this. Finland has been working on military and defense industry and cooperation with the United States since the early 1990s when we bought our over 60 F-18s. Always a very reliable partner in so many ways. As a matter of fact, in my first phone conversation with President Trump, we discussed the F-35s, and we are on track for the first delivery before the end of this year, and we'll continue to work with the American military industry. Just a little gentle reminder, I think, 2 things. One is that military planning is always long-term, so you don't, make these orders and then just suddenly say, sorry, we're not going to do it. I mean, these are really, really long processes. We're talking 5, 10, even 15 years.
And that is also guaranteeing the fact that when you do these deals with Ukraine, it's once again delaying the war. Delaying it, right? It is delaying the possibility of peace. The prospect of peace as we have said for the last few weeks, and even Finnish students have said, that it's coming nearer. Well, if we keep doing military pushings and military investments into Ukraine, we're not going to have a peace. We're just going to have delayed peace for the next 5, 10, 20 years. And Ukrainian people will fall under the rubble while America makes profits from their materials and Europe puts Ukraine under their debt with military things.
So you can't sort of just switch them off. The second one is that I don't think that there is a disincentive for the US military industry to wind down in Europe. The reason is that Europe actually buys double the amount of stuff from the US in terms of military equipment, in terms of vehicles, in terms of the F-35s than the US does itself.
So this is a very interesting point that Stubb says here, because he says that a disincentive from US and military industry to wind down in Europe, that there isn't one, that US doesn't have a disincentive. Well, of course they don't, because they're making profit. America is making massive amounts of money from enslaving European militaries under their profits, under their money, right? Trump now has asked more countries to put that, 5% of their things into it. But regardless, again, the fact that Europe is buying arms and all of this does not show that we want peace with Russia. It really doesn't.
In terms of vehicles, in terms of the F-35s than the US does itself.
On the matter of defense spending, historically, Europe has relied on the U.S. for security, leading to a underinvestment in Europe's own defense capabilities. Some European countries have increased their own defense spending. But what's really required in shifting that paradigm, as President Trump has called for?
Well, my first observation is to say that President Trump is right. And the pressure that he has put on allies in NATO has been very welcomed. But there are a lot of our European allies that haven't done enough. So when President Trump started to put pressure on the allies in 2016, there were only about 3 NATO countries that went over the 2% threshold. Now we're 23. The US wants Europe to take more responsibility for its own security and defense. And I think the US is right on that. But the transition is long, and this is not binary. We're allies. We're in this together, hand to hand. European security is in the interest of American security and vice versa.
The European security is in interest of American security for one reason and one reason only: profit. The only reason why European security gives a damn to American security or American interests is because they can rely on the fact that Europe won't invest into its own military, so they will buy it from us, and we will make millions. Billions! Right? And when a war eventually comes in, we can keep funding that war with arms to the side that is losing, right? And we can keep making profit because they're buying it from us, no matter what the end goal is, because it's short-term profits that matter.
Vice versa.
Looking ahead, how do you see the geopolitical landscape in Europe changing as a result of the war in Ukraine and compounded by the current administration's approach toward Moscow?
2 things come to mind. The first one is I've never seen the European Union or Europe as united as we are right now. If someone would have told me 3 years ago that Finland would join NATO, that Sweden would join NATO, that Ukraine would become a member of the European Union, etc., I said, not in your wildest dreams. The second observation.
And I wish they would have stayed in those wildest dreams, because it is a mistake for Sweden and Finland to join NATO. These are foolish things that we have done. There was no reason to join NATO.
To make is that, in the first 5 weeks of the Trump presidency, he has probably done more to give incentive for Europe to take care of its own security and defense than we have seen in the past 30 or 50 years overall. So there is a paradigm shift. I think the most important thing to keep in mind here is that values bind, and that's why I think interests bind as well. So it's going to have to be a continued partnership, transatlantic partnership between Europe and the United States, where Europe takes more responsibility. because we all understand that when it comes to Putin, all he wants basically is imperialism, and we don't want that.
I mean, come the fuck on. Come on. Alexander Stubb, come on. You can't seriously say these things. When it comes to Putin, all he wants is imperialism. Okay, so now it's confirmed. Alexander Stubb truly believes that President Putin is an imperialist and he wants to bring back the Russian Empire. This is the stupidest claim. This is the sort of things you see on social media sort of claims. This is not the claims that you see from the president, for God's sakes. How long has Putin been in power? More than 20 years, if I remember correctly. He hasn't annexed one country. What do you mean imperialism? I really don't understand. If we look at historical imperialism, it doesn't add up. If we look at definitions of imperialism, it doesn't add up. And if we look at the actions of Russia, it doesn't add up. What do you mean Putin all wants, he basically is imperialism? If we analyze what Putin truly wants and what he has wanted, is that of border security and stable relations with the West. I would say this is what Putin wants. Putin wants stable relations, and this is why he tried to join NATO. He tried to join the Americans multiple times, and has tried to be a friend of the West. I find this, again, very disappointing, and Alexander Stubb continues to make Russophobic claims. Thank you for watching this video.